So hello everybody, welcome to this Stammtisch today. So as nobody else is here to introduce, I'll do it today. I want to introduce you Rainer Kurz. I think we know him already. He's the founder of Freelance-Market, which is a leading procurement source for professional services in Germany. In this internet marketplace, companies find qualified contractor support for particularly all business needs, from accountants, business consultants, coaches, designers, engineers to programs and zero-emission experts. Freelance-Market was launched in Germany in 2004 and since then has successfully introduced thousands of high-qualified contractors. Through licenses, Freelance-Market now also operates in other countries: Austria, New Zealand, Australia, the Czech Republic, and France, which will start in October.
I would like to speak about where does the term freelancer come from and what are the key professions of freelancers. And I will also speak about how it's differently used, the term and the legal conditions in different countries, since the topic of the speech is freelancers in the European Union. And I will speak in general about how does it come when there is temporary employment and when there is normal employment. Freelancers are so-called atypical employments. I will focus on that a little bit. And I speak about why people do it, why people want to be contractors or freelancers, and why employers are there who want to use contractors instead of fixed employees. I will speak about different issues freelance employment has and how it might develop in the future. But before I start, I just would like to know who of you is a contractor or freelancer, or was a contractor or freelancer? 1, 2, 3, 4. So four people. So you four will already know where the term freelancer comes from, but for those who don't know, I will explain. But maybe you know why is it called freelancer? Yeah. Yeah. So you have the term free. Yeah. What lancer? What's a lancer? Lancer in German that would be Lanzer. Yeah, it's a lance. Yeah, so like a spear, a lance. And
Middle Ages.
Yes, in medieval times, you had soldiers which you could buy. You could hire them, contract soldiers, and the contract soldier comes with a tool. Today, a freelancer comes with a laptop and a mobile phone. At that time, you could hire a söldner, a lancer. You could hire him, including his spear, his lance. So it's his own lance, and he can decide on which side to fight. So he is a free lance. So hence the term freelancer, lancer, Freilancer. So this is the story. Nowadays, as you know, wars are not fought anymore so much by military means. It's more on the economic field. So you also need your troops. And you either have fully employed troops, or if you have a shorter battle, you just add someone who is an expert in using the lance or something else. So for temporary use. So whereas this is basically the origin of this strange word, freelancer. So what are the key professions nowadays where freelance people are used.
Journalists.
Journalists, yes. Photographers, yeah. Lawyers. Architects, yeah. IT, yes. Yes. Medicine. Medicine, yeah. Some rarely I know that there are some doctors which can jump in, yeah. So sometimes we work on this, but yeah, technically every medicine who has its own practice legally is also a Freiberufler in Germany. So yeah, so basically a medicine, nearly half of Freiberufler in Germany are actually doctors. We're not appearing on the market, it's a special form, very regulated, and it's not business to business, it's more business to private. But yeah, if you have your own practice, like a lawyer, a doctor has often their own practice, it's actually technically also a freelancer. Yeah, now I heard travel guides. Travel guides, maybe? Yes. Sometimes. I will speak a little bit about the German regulation about it is, and it depends a little bit on the country because regulations tend to be different in different countries. But yeah, partly we are also freelancers or contractors. Marketing, yes. You need a market researcher, for example, or a marketing strategist, or someone who does, in this comes close to graphic designers, which we mentioned before, someone who will produce your marketing material. Also, this is excellent employment for freelancers. Yes. Yes. Teachers. Yeah, I know in terms of adult education. Yeah, like language trainers. Yes. Exactly. Yeah. So trainers, basically coaches and trainers. Yeah. Web design, yeah. Yes, exactly, yeah. And web design is something in between IT and graphics design, and in both areas we have a lot of freelance people, and web design is also very popular, especially because many small companies need internet pages, and instead of hiring a big agency, a small company is happy just to have a web designer who can do it, who is working freelance, yes.
For people who work for TV.
Yeah. So like producers, cameraman. Yeah, we have photographers, but also a cameraman, camera women. Yeah, that's. But also people who are working more like journalists in the television industry. Yeah, also often they work as freelance people. And when you go to big movie production companies who do different documentaries, which are bought by the leading television stations, normally it's made by some agencies. From what I heard, about half their staff is actually freelance. Some are employed, but we use a lot of freelance people as well. So I think we covered practically all professions, which can be also found in the different marketplaces. Now I will speak a little bit about the different definitions of a term, freelancer, depending on the country. So in Germany, what is the term freelancer in German language? It's a Freiberufler, yeah. And with Freiberufler, it's a very specific thing because it's a definition by the tax authorities in Germany. So you had to get a permission that the tax authorities will see you as a Freiberufler or not, unlike other countries. To give you one example, if you are an electric engineer, you studied electric engineering, and you do plans how to cable the electric cables in buildings, you can work as a Freiberufler in Germany. If you are electrical master and you do exactly the same, you will be not accepted. Even though both are actually doing plans how to put the cabling in houses, because in Germany, to be a Freiberufler, you have to be academically enabled. So you need academic studies, except of artists, because you can be an artist without academic studies. So if you don't have an academic background, you can't be a Freiberufler. So, for example, if you work as a freelance secretary in Germany, by the tax authorities, you are not a Freiberufler. What you will do is you would do gewerblich. Yeah. Which is, however, you can't call yourself in Germany, but you are Freiberufler. It's different from country to country, but this is a quite strange situation. I'm a business consultant, but originally I studied electrical engineering. I have a PhD in electrical engineering. I worked with McKinsey, and the German tax authorities said you can't be a Freiberufler because you never studied economics. Yeah, how strange is that? Yeah. So I had to fight. Finally, I got it. But yeah, this is the situation in Germany. So Freiberufler is not exactly the same in different countries. Now in English, people normally don't use the term freelance. They use a different term. You know which term they use? Contractor. So the term would be contractor in English language. When you speak, yeah?
But this wouldn't apply to, say, smaller people or smaller groups, because I'm a fellow in London who said I'm a freelance photographer. So freelance is used.
Yes, it's sometimes used, but in very specific areas. The term freelance is mostly used for people who are journalists, freelance writers. This is the original, the main usage in English language, but also someone who is producing like a writer, like a photographer. Sometimes it's called a freelance photographer. But if you are a business consultant, people don't use the term freelance so much. So the term contractor would be much more often used. So German term for contractor would be maybe Vertragsnehmer. So on the websites I'm running in countries like Australia, I realize in Australia the marketplace is also called Freelance-Market, but there it's a little bit misleading because people expect journalists and writers on this website, but not so much people who are in IT industry or finance experts and so on. So that would be the English term contractor. Now, however, contractor can be much more, of course. Yeah, if you build a whole house, you would be seen as a contractor, but you would not be seen as a freelancer in Germany. So it's different definitions of a word. Now, in the Czech Republic, where I also operate a marketplace, it's called OSVČ, which stands for, and I now read it, OSVČ, which is a C with a little ch. Yeah. Ch, yeah. Can you pronounce it correctly? OSVČ. Yeah. So basically, yeah, it's exactly like you wrote it.
Yeah, OSVČ.
Yes. Which stands for, and now you will laugh about it, Osoba samostatnie.
Osoba means person.
Yeah.
Samostatny, free.
Yes, yeah. Fidelečne.
No.
Fidelečne čina.
Fidelečne čina. Vita means income.
Yeah.
But China? I don't know. This is not
China. Yeah. So basically it means the same term as Freiberufler. Freiberufler means the same as Selbstständiger. So there is no term which distinguishes between freelancer and self-employed. There's no word in Czech language. So it can be misleading. So if you run a little restaurant around the corner doing French fries, you would be a Selbstständiger, yeah? You would be self-employed, but you would not be seen as a freelancer. But in Czech language, it's the same word. Yeah, so there can be some misunderstandings. Now, in Hungarian, the Hungarian word, no, I don't tell it what is in Hungarian, but apparently it's the same word like free swimmer. Yeah, so if you are a free swimmer swimming on your own, It's a freelance, which, however, doesn't sound very professional. If you're a free swimmer, it's but this is a term. Yeah, so contractor sounds maybe more professional than free swimmer, but so you come across different terms, different definitions in different marketplaces. In France, and I'm now quite busy with my French franchisee to introduce a market there. The term would be indépendant, independent, or another term would be freelance. So actually, the English term
pronunciation.
freelance, So the English term there is also quite popular. So, but whatever we talk about here, freelancer is actually part of so-called atypical employment. Atypical employment. What does it mean? Atypical. So it's not the normal, non-normal employment. So I was at a lecture of the trade union of Verdi, which is one of the trade unions for people in the service area, and we had a study 20 years ago. 80% of the German population was typically employed. 20% were atypically employed. Atypical employment would be something like a freelancer, or would be someone who is part-time, or someone who works via temp agencies, German temp agency, Zeitarbeit, temporary workforce. So that would be atypical. 20 years ago, that was 20% atypical. Nowadays, 40%. Yeah, the question?
But they get difficulties with social, and you have to, when you are employed, you have to pay benefits.
Yeah.
But when you are a freelancer, if you are working in a firm for a long time, 1 year, 2 years, so
Yeah, well, I tell you, in Germany, whatever form of employment you do, it's getting difficult. Yeah. So what happens if you want to get rid of an employee? It's difficult. What happens if you have someone who is working by a temporary work agency? Maybe there's some special laws that we sometimes get the same rights. There's the most infamous law in Germany, and maybe you help me to translate it into English, Gesetz zur Verhinderung der Scheinselbstständigkeit. Yeah, so Germany has such beautiful laws, which I would translate the law to prevent pretended employment. Pretended self-employment. A law for the prevention of pretended self-employment. So the whole employment sector is pretty complicated in Germany, and each way of employment, typical or atypical, has its challenges. However, what we see is atypical employment is increasing. There's much more people who work part-time. Now even men can work part-time. 20 years ago, every employer where you apply as a man, we say, "Oh, can I work part-time?" would show you where the door is. Freelance work is just one form of atypical employment, which is increasing alongside with other forms of atypical employment. So at the moment in Germany, we have 82 million population. About 40 million of the population is active in the working process, out of which 3 million are entrepreneurs, including freelancers, and the other 37 million are employed people or someone seeking employment. So out of this whole workforce of about 40 million, there is 1 million freelancers. So it's a small part, 1 million. 20 years ago, it was 500,000. So you can see that there is a trend towards more and more contractors in Germany. It's not a huge trend. I don't say in 5 years from now everyone is a contractor, but you can see a tendency towards more and more people working freelance.
Years ago, there were there was a large number of people working or having having their own farms. And I think the farmers, the small farmers, had been freelancers too in this.
Would be self-employed. Would be self-employed. In the Czech Republic, yeah, it would be OSVČ. Yes.
Okay.
But yeah, it doesn't distinguish between being a freelancer or self-employed. But maybe to add something on the definition of a German tax authorities, what is a Freiberufler? You have to be academically enabled, and you can only produce something which you can't touch. So you can produce, you can't touch. So let's assume if I produce wheat as a farmer, that is not a freelancer. But if I produce plants, how to manage farms, if I take phone calls to coordinate where to sell the grains, that could be a freelancer, because it's not something the produce is not touchable. But as soon as it can be touched, it's not freelance. As soon it is into the brokerage, broking business, like if let's assume you are a real estate agent, also you, this type of trade can't also be freelance. This is just the funny German definition. So basically the idea of a freelancer is someone who is paid by the hour. It's not paid by a product, like a real estate agent gets a commission for each house he or she sells. But if someone would work and basically counsel someone who wants to sell a house and say, do this, do that, and so on, that could be freelance. But as soon as you get a commission out of it, like a typical trade shop, job, sales business, again, it can't be freelance. So someone who is producing like a farmer can't be a Freiberufler in Germany.
And he owns the land. He owns the land. He's landowner.
Yes, yes. So basically, he also massively owns production tools, while a freelancer has just very limited tools. We have maybe a laptop with some specialized software or whatever, but mostly it's the brain you're buying.
I have another question. Do the freelancers show up in the statistic of unemployment?
No, no. They show up in
1 million, and I guess there are many not continuously working, you know.
Yes. Now there's about 5 years ago there was this very strange thing in Germany, because suddenly there was an introduction of unemployment insurance for contractors, for freelancers. Yeah, that was very strange. So in between two projects, we just could say I'm unemployed, you get money, but this is not normally. So that's a pretty strange law, and as far as I know, the German government stopped this type of insurance, or actually I think they raised the amount you have to pay into that insurance so much that it's not interesting anymore. But for sometimes in between two projects, in between two assignments, you could actually report yourself being unemployed as a freelancer. So that happened. I also heard about people who are like actors. We go to the unemployment office, they are unemployed, and every time we have an acting job, they say, no, I'm working, and so half of the year we got money from the unemployment office. So that sometimes can happen. And I will come back later about how much work freelancers actually have, how well their Auslastung, their utility rate is, so utilization rate is. So, but normally, no, we shouldn't show up on the unemployment statistics.
Like with the Ich-Firmen, some years ago, they recommended to establish
That was the so-called Ich AG in Germany. It was an experiment of the unemployment office to get unemployed people off the street, and many of the people with the Ich AG actually, the first thing we did was we registered on my marketplace on Freelance-Market, and these were in most cases people who are not entrepreneurs. The unemployment office forced them or encouraged them very strongly to become entrepreneurs, but they are not entrepreneurs by personality. So most people completely failed, and this is why the unemployment office gave it up. But now we started again a program maybe 1 year ago, Existenzgründung.
Yes, and business plan. You can't get your own firm except you have a business plan.
Yeah, but the idea is that in the first time of a foundation of your own company, you will still get the unemployment benefits, even though you are not available for the work market. So it's again very similar to Ich AG, but I hope this time the unemployment office doesn't want to get rid from all unemployed people by telling them now you're a perfect entrepreneur, which is not the case for many people. Yeah.
How do you classify Steuerberater in Germany?
In terms of if they're Steuerberater is as long as well. Now there's another thing about the German definition of Freiberufler. A Freiberufler can have employees. It's possible to have employees, up to 10 employees. It's possible. Now, we have a lawyer for Gesellschaftsrecht. I think that's true. Yeah. So, yes. So, let's assume we have a tax office and you have 20 employees. You can't be a freelancer just by the German definition, but let's assume you are a tax advisor and maybe you have 2 people who help you to do a tax declaration, and you have then you can decide. Do you want to register a trade, like a Gewerbe? Do you want to operate as a freelancer, Freiberufler? Or do you maybe have a different form of company, like a limited company, like a GmbH in Germany? Tax advisors can opt to be working as a Freiberufler. No, is this correct?
Lawyers too.
And lawyers, exactly the same, yes. But often I think we might prefer to have a limited company like a GmbH, so in case something goes wrong, we don't have to use their own house to pay for the damage they cause. Good. So, yeah.
We talk about insurance. A freelancer, but he has to have insurance.
No, it doesn't have to. In most cases, we don't have to. There might be some trade professions where it's required. Like if I'm doing some work on gas pipelines or whatever, maybe there is a law that I need insurance. It's possible. But normally we don't have to. Sometimes the clients ask if they have whatever type of liability insurance. But from my experience in the business consulting field, many of the freelance business consultants, they don't have insurance. It's not legally required in Germany. Sometimes in Australia, for example, it's a different issue, because if you have a client which is a large company, if we hire contractors who can't pay in case of a damage, then a stock traded company in Australia have to put this into the annual report as a special risk. So no one wants to, so we have to write in their annual report that an additional risk of a company is that they are using contractors who might not be able to pay fully for damage they cause. So in Australia, for example, the companies look much more after someone is insured, because the legal business is much more critical in Australia than in Germany, but in most professions it's not required. One exception would be artists, because there's a so-called Künstlersozialkasse. So that's also a forced pension fund an health insurance scheme called Künstlersozialkasse for everyone who is an artist. So, and there is often debate what is an artist. So someone like a graphics designer normally is seen to be an artist, but if someone is a web designer, that's in between artistic work and programming. There's often some debate. Does a web designer have to be insured at the Künstlersozialkasse, so the artist's insurance scheme?
For a freelancer, for example.
Yeah. Like also performing artists, they have to be at the Künstlersozialkasse. Actors, musicians. Yeah. What's the advantage of using a freelancer? In many cases, the motivation is you don't need someone who's fully employed. Let's assume you have a restaurant and you need a web page. Then it's not worthwhile to have a full-time employed person just to care for your web page. So for this specialization, you just bring in expertise from outside. And if the project is not that complex, it's enough to just have one person. If you have a very complex website, let's assume you are Daimler-Benz and you want to have a big internet activity, then you need a big agency or agencies to coordinate it all. In this case, I wouldn't recommend to use one freelancer. Now, maybe I just quickly finish my presentation so we can even better enjoy the meal. So, with many different aspects in different countries. One aspect is teleworking, because more and more people don't have to work at the location. Just to give you one extreme example, graphics designers. 20 years ago, if you were a graphics designer, the only place where you could work was at your client side. You had to do the plans, speak with your client, how do you like it and whatever. Nowadays, graphics design is perfect for teleworking. You don't have to be with the client, you can transmit the pictures and up and download all the different files easily. So the profession of graphics designer, as one example, has completely changed from working at the client side towards into teleworking. And when we speak about teleworking, then the people can be in different areas. Like on Freelance-Market, we have many contractors from Berlin, but not many clients. But we have many clients in Stuttgart or Munich who don't find the contractors here, but we find it in Berlin or in Cottbus. And this even goes beyond national borders. So it's now very popular for people from Russia or India or Pakistan.
Yes, India, I know.
Yeah, to work via teleworking. And while there are a lot of illegal issues to get a person from Russia or India to work here, if it's about teleworking, there is no legal restriction on it. So if I use a graphics designer who is based on the Philippines, I can do it. There's not any, there's no issues about visa and so on if we do teleworking. So the type of protection of the German workforce market doesn't apply in case of teleworking. So, and this is also a big aspect in freelance work nowadays.
And he works as long as he's free.
Yes,
Sometimes this is an advantage, sometimes it's a disadvantage. Just for example, as a business consultant, often I was in meeting all day with my clients, and then out of the results I was producing some nice PowerPoint charts. So, and how do you do that as a business consultant? You actually sketch it down on a piece of paper, put it in a fax machine to a graphics designer, and this is what I did in the evening, maybe at 10 p.m. I put it into the graphics designer. My graphics designer worked overnight, and the next morning at 8:30, I was looking in my email about the graphics which my graphics designer worked overnight. Spent a couple of more minutes to refine it, and at 9 o'clock I was presenting to my client the charts which we actually finished to discuss at 9 p.m. the night before. and the client asks, "Ah, did you work the whole night?" So yeah, you can benefit from time zone differences. Also, teleworking is much more flexible for employees all over the world. Like I had one lady working for me, and she has 4 children, and the time she normally worked was from 5 to 7 a.m. a.m. in the morning. That was the only time she actually had. Yes. So in normal employment, that's where you work at the client's location. It's not possible, but for teleworking, it's perfect for people who want to have such a type of work environment. So
there must be a lot of confidence between, between the contractors.
Yes. Now, when you
see, but if he works in, and you don't know, does he give it to other people too?
Yes.
No, there are no. With an employer, you have a contract.
Yes.
And if something happens, you can point out.
Now, a rule of thumb in management is that a manager spends about 10% of the employee's time to manage that employee. So if you have 10 employees in your department and you're a manager, basically you spend 100% of your time to manage all the 10 employees to make sure that their work is useful and so on. Now, when you have people who do teleworking, you have to do the same. So it's not like saying I have someone who's a teleworker, I give him job for the next 100 hours, and then after 100 hours without much interaction, I think there's a perfect result. Of course, to manage someone who is working for you, you have to spend 5 or 10% of his or her working time to manage this person, and this also applies for teleworking. And many people don't understand it correctly, and they just write down on an email, because people are lazy to make phone calls. We write on an email what we want, we send it to a teleworker, and hope that 100 hours later the result will be perfect, which of course will be not perfect, it will be quite screwed up. So also in teleworking, you have to manage your people. So it's no different from working at your own location.
The quality of work and time.
Yeah. Yes.
Can you be absolutely sure that what you transmit via internet, your ideas and plans are sure and not in danger of being seen by rival companies?
Yeah, I think the biggest risk of losing information is the employee. And you have that risk both for contractors as well as for people who are employed at your own company. So yeah, like in consulting industry, there's a lot of fluctuation of consultants, and consultants work on different projects. They are fixed employed, but yeah, it could be that some people, after they lose their clients, they go away from their client, or they change their employment away from that consulting company, but they still have some data on the laptop. So it's a general issue. It's not limited to contractors alone. But I think yeah, there is a risk of in the internet transmission. You might lose some data when it's transmitted to the internet. But a much bigger risk is your own employee. And there it doesn't make a difference if this person is freelance or employed. Good. So now to wrap up, I will just say a little bit about what we discussed here, and then I will tell you an interesting story which happened at Freelance-Market, and then I'm open for some questions. So I explained to you in the last 40 minutes where the term contractor came from, what are the key professions. Actually, you told me what are the key professions. Also, that the definition of a contractor or freelancer is quite different depending on the country. Maybe we can agree it's so-called atypical employment, which, however, is becoming more and more typical in our society. I spoke a little bit about the advantages of this type of form, more flexibility for employer, employee, and so on. And I spoke about some international aspects, including telework. And maybe to wrap up, I just tell you a nice story what happened on my marketplace. There was a lady, 86 years old. She worked as a scientist, has a PhD. She worked both in Germany and the United States. And at the age of 86, she felt a little bit bored. And so she, just by coincidence, found an internet website called Freelance-Market and registered there as a freelancer. So with 86, for the first time in her life, she became a freelancer. Yeah, I used that story a little bit, so I it was printed in a couple of other newspapers. But
did she have to write her age? Or?
Yes, and putting a picture on it, and so yeah, it was pretty good. Yeah, so yeah, she was really enthusiastic to suddenly get work all over, being needed again. So yeah, everyone can be a freelancer. So thank you very much.
Thank you for the
So now I can enjoy myself.
Maybe they can warn you.